Okay, sorry.
I'm on,
Okay,
yeah.
perfect. Okay, good evening, everyone. We'll call the meeting to order. Thank you for being with us tonight. And we'll call the meeting to order. First item, Common Clerk, please.
Your worship, approval of the agenda.
Okay. Okay, I think that was Councillor McKenzie and seconded by Councillor Merrithew. Thank you. And on the question, all those in favor? Anybody contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. Next item.
Item 3, disclosures of conflict of interest.
Okay, not seeing any. Thank you. Next item.
And item 4.1, your worship, we have advertised for a public hearing, and the first item is the Saint John Heritage Conservation's bylaw, and Commissioner Hamilton will give a brief introductory.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Hamilton.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of Council. Tonight marks an important milestone in the delivery of Council's priorities. As Council knows, growth is a top priority to help create a sustainable Saint John. Tonight, the staff of Growth and Community Development Services are pleased to deliver two important growth initiatives for your consideration. First, you will consider a state-of-the-art new heritage bylaw, which will bring improved flexibility, clarity, and predictability for investors in the city's heritage areas. Together with an aspirational Central Peninsula neighborhood plan, which brings Plan SJ's vision to life, this transformational plan will be key to unlocking the growth and driving positive change in the urban core for decades to come. The momentum of these initiatives importantly has taken root in the community and is already shaping new developments coming forward. From a procedural perspective, these two deliverables, while related, must proceed as separate public hearings with individual presentations from staff. We will be starting first with the Heritage Bylaw, and Ms. Emma Sampson, our Heritage Officer, will deliver the staff presentation. It recommends a new approach to infill development and also the removal of a specific property. While not formally part of the bylaw and subject to tonight's hearing, the recommendations before you will also include a policy to address local heritage historic place designation to implement the previous direction given by this council. Following the heritage hearing, the public hearing for the Central Peninsula Neighborhood Plan and related amendments to the Municipal Plan and Zoning Bylaw will proceed as your second item on the agenda, and this you will also receive a staff presentation by Mr. Andrew Reid, planner and project lead for the Central Peninsula Plan. I would add that the recommendations have been endorsed by the Heritage Board, the Neighborhood Action Team, and the Planning Advisory Committee, which positions Council to move forward with the adoption of these bylaws this evening. Should however, there be any significant changes arising from either of the hearings, Council is advised to refer the changes back to staff for consideration prior to first and second reading. Finally, I would like to also acknowledge that this project has engaged a broader team who are supporting tonight's efforts. So in addition to our project leads, Emma Sampson and Andrew Reid, we have with us tonight in the audience Amy Poffenroth, Phil Ouellette, and Ken Melanson, and they are also joined by members of the Heritage Development Board and the Neighborhood Action Team who have committed significant leadership of the course of the last several years to bring these game-changing deliverables forward. And we would also acknowledge the funding support from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the province, and Uptown Saint John. With that, I'll turn things over to Emma Sampson to deliver tonight's presentation on the Heritage Bylaw.
Okay, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Hamilton.
Thank you, Your Worship, and members of Council. We are pleased to present to you tonight the second phase of amendments to the Heritage Conservation Areas Bylaw. These modernizations, an identified priority of Common Council, were developed over the past 2 years through public engagements, focus groups, and workshops, and will help to introduce a new era of design opportunities within heritage conservation areas. As you've heard before, these revisions come to you tonight by way of the Central Peninsula Plan project. Both phases of the Heritage Bylaw amendments were developed together with the Central Peninsula Plan. This is to ensure that the development process on the Central Peninsula is clearer and friendlier, responsive to what we heard through neighbourhood plan engagement. In September, Common Council approved the first phase of Heritage Bylaw amendments, which centred around demolition provisions, new exemptions from heritage permits for existing buildings, and also covered a number of external amendment requests. Tonight, we begin the conclusion of over 2 years of coordinated work. My colleague Andrew Reid will be presenting to you on the Central Peninsula Plan, a transformative vision for the heart of Saint John. Linked to this secondary plan is the second and final phase of Heritage Bylaw amendments. The package of amendments that is being moved forward as Phase 2 consists of 2 items. The first are the new standards for new development, what we call infill, and major additions in heritage conservation areas. One aspect to note is that the provisions relating to overall building height and to street wall height have been removed from the Heritage Bylaw and will now be governed through the zoning bylaw. To speak very briefly on this, as this will be covered in full in the Central Peninsula Plan presentation, this change creates legislative clarity and predictability and will allow for variances which cannot be done through the Heritage Conservation Act. Also included in the amendments is the revision of the definition of heritage conservation area to support the direction of Common Council through its resolution of October 21st, 2019 on local historic places. The second amendment included tonight is an external request for removal of designation for a vacant lot at 249 Douglas Avenue in the Douglas Avenue Heritage Conservation Area. And then finally, there is the adoption by Common Council of the local historic place designation policy. This item is not part of the amendments, where it is a policy document, but is brought tonight for approval through previous direction of Common Council. A key area for improvement in the Heritage Bylaw, as identified through public engagements, focus groups, and workshops, are design standards for new construction. The existing standards, while thorough in their consideration of all design elements, have been seen as prescriptive and inflexible, making it challenging for contemporary or unconventional designs. Additionally, given that the Heritage Development Board and staff do not have the ability to grant variances, a proposed project that fails to meet one or any of the current standards cannot be approved, or if it is subject to appeal through the Assessment and Planning Appeal Board. Outside of provisions around height, as mentioned previously, the remainder of the design elements will be guided by a new 3-tiered system that lives as a schedule in the Heritage Bylaw. These standards progress beyond imitation or replication of heritage buildings, which is detrimental to heritage conservation itself, and allow for a broader range of design, from those that are inspired by and take cues from the neighboring buildings to those that are truly contemporary. For each of these tiers, there are also new application requirements, coordinating degree of oversight and analysis to how contemporary the design is. This helps to ensure that a new development or a major addition to a building is considerate of its setting. To better illustrate, this is a convenient real-world example. Neumarkt is a neighborhood in Dresden, Germany that was flattened in the Second World War and has undergone numerous periods of rebuilding in the decades since. On the left is an example of replication of an historic building, typically discouraged as it blurs the line of real and fake. To its right is what could be considered a Tier 1 building, at the opposite end a Tier 2 building, and finally a Tier 3. The progression from quote-unquote historic to contemporary is stepped and apparent through each of these buildings. So to go into more detail for each of these tiers, Tier 1 buildings take strong influence from their historic setting, but are not replicas. This is achieved through a number of different design standards. These would have similar traditional building composition. In the case of the commercial building on the top left, the defined ground level storefront, or for the townhouse on the right, the black cornice at the top. These designs would also have similar ratios of solid materials or walls to windows, and similar window size and orientation, typically vertical, or in the case of the houses at the bottom, more square and horizontal. These buildings would use traditional materials or materials that are reasonable substitutes in material and color. A Tier 2 development begins to mesh historic influences with more contemporary design. Like Tier 1 developments, they would have similar building compositions and similar ratios of windows to walls. What differs is the window size and orientation, as can be seen through the use of larger multi-story windows or horizontal windows mixed with vertical windows, as on the building on the left. These developments can also use contemporary materials in a traditional palette. Finally, we have Tier 3 buildings, which are for designs that are truly contemporary. These designs would vary in all standards and would be able to use contemporary materials, building composition, and form to result in high-quality, architecturally motivated design. Tier 3 designs would be encouraged more strongly in locations with limited or broken street wall, or on the edges of heritage conservation areas, as these designs can redefine their settings, creating key architectural moments for the City of Saint John. So where the tiered process creates a spectrum of architectural compatibility with historic buildings, the approval process has also been revised to provide increasing oversight and analysis on a development as it becomes more contemporary. For a Tier 1 application, the process would remain the same as it is currently. A complete application would be reviewed by the Heritage Officer and the Heritage Development Board, who would be the body issuing a heritage permit for the successful application. For a Tier 2 application, review is still performed by the Heritage Officer and the Board, but an applicant would also be required to submit a Heritage Impact Statement. This is a brief document that assesses the impact of the proposed development on the site, on adjacent buildings, and on the neighborhood, and shows how the development manages or mitigates these impacts. For a Tier 3 application, the approval process asks the most of the applicant and allows for greater public involvement. In addition to the applicant would also be required to submit a Heritage Impact Assessment, which is a more in-depth version of the Heritage Impact Statement, and the application would be subject to a third-party peer review. This larger application package would still be reviewed in full by the Heritage Officer and the Board, but the Board would then be passing on its recommendation to Common Council for a site-specific bylaw amendment. This ensures the greatest amount of public awareness and involvement through meetings, notices, and a public hearing for designs that could have a greater breadth of impact. For our external amendment request, we have included a request for removal of designation. The owners at the property of 249 Douglas Avenue in the Douglas Avenue Heritage Conservation Area obtained in 2017 a demolition permit for the residents at the site, having followed the required public listing for the sale of property with no purchaser. Following brief consideration of an infill development, the owners chose to list the lot for sale, and as of this date, the lot has been listed for over a year and a half with no purchase. Both staff and the Heritage Development Board acknowledged that the loss of a structure does not suggest that the designation should be removed. If the lot were in the middle of Germain Street or any other cohesive area, the recommendation would very likely be denial. However, where Douglas Avenue can be viewed as a collection of spot designations, and where the two neighboring properties do not have designation, the recommendation from both staff and from the Heritage Development Board is regretfully to remove the property at 249 Douglas Avenue from the Saint John Heritage Conservation Areas bylaw. And then finally, we have the local historic place designation policy, and this is the formalization of the framework and evaluation matrix around local historic places that was approved by Common Council on October 21st, 2019, with direction given to staff to develop that policy. It creates a stepped, predictable process for property owners who are interested in designation and who are enthusiastic about heritage, and it addresses the lack of critical analysis. This is accomplished through an evaluation matrix that aims to be objective and encompassing of heritage values beyond architectural merit. Lastly, it can allow for more well-informed creation of new heritage conservation areas through neighborhood initiative. In consideration of financial incentives at a municipal level will be addressed more fully through the Heritage Grant Program policy, while access to provincial incentives comes by right of being designated as a local historic place. The Saint John Heritage Conservation Areas bylaw has and will continue to provide for appropriate development and the conservation of historic buildings within the city. Allowing for a wider and more contemporary variety of new development in heritage conservation areas, accompanied by appropriate oversight, it will help ensure vibrant new development that enhances the heritage character of Saint John. By coordinating this modernization with the larger vision of the Central Peninsula Plan, the city will be setting the stage for transformative change now and for years to come, creating the heritage of tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Sampson, for the presentation. Okay, we'll move into the public hearing now, and in particular with the first item, which is the Saint John Heritage Conservation Areas Bylaw Phase 2 amendments. I'll ask if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to these amendments. Okay, I'll ask again. We're in the public hearing now for the issue related to Saint John Heritage Conservation Areas, Bylaw Phase 2 amendments. I'll ask again if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to these amendments. Okay, I'm not seeing anyone, and I'll ask a third and final time. With regards to the Saint John Heritage Conservation Areas Bylaw Phase 2 amendments, if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to these amendments. Oh, Okay, thank you.
Hi, yeah, my name's Adam Paul.
No, sorry, Adam, can you just come up to the podium, please? And you can give us your name for the record there, and then, perfect, thank you.
Hi, it's Adam Pottle, Uptown resident basically my whole life. This isn't in opposition. I think a lot of these amendments are great. I own property that's going to be positively impacted by these changes, but we should be very cautious with the contemporary development. Like just Google Rideau Hall and what they're planning on doing with that. So I really hope that the third party review is pretty good, because you can end up mangling a lot of historic neighborhoods and historic structures. That's all.
Okay, just 1 second, Adam, please. Any questions for Adam? Not seeing any, Adam. Thank you very much, sir. Okay, and I'll ask again if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to these amendments. Okay, thank you. And I'll move now to those wishing to speak in favor of the Saint John Heritage Conservation Areas Bylaw Phase 2 amendments. Okay, thank you. You look familiar, sir, if you'd like to come to the podium. After.
Good evening, Your Worship and Councillors. I'm Bob Boyce, Chair of the Heritage Development Board, and I, of course, will be brief and will be speaking in favor of these amendments. And I have with me this evening a couple of members of our board, Jamie Watson and Melissa Wakefield. And our board has, and of course, Councillor Armstrong, who's worked with us on these. We've worked hard on these amendments and wrestled with the issues to bring it to this point, and we're quite proud of. We believe we've developed a set of amendments that will indeed make it difficult but not impossible to step outside the boundaries of and more into very contemporary design in special circumstances, and that will fall to council at some point to deal with those, and that's an important part of that process. That, as you note in the three tiers, we make it more difficult the further you wish to depart from the traditional approach of just being very respectful, but it's worth doing, and we believe, as always, that it's important to try and find a balance between encouraging growth. We get that, and in fact the heritage area has been probably one of the strongest growth areas in the city in terms of development of the heritage stock that we have, and that's been a result of the attractiveness and the character of those neighborhoods and the stability of investment that heritage conservation area planning provides. But we do recognize that there are occasions when there's an opportunity to do something a little different, and that we feel the board can respond to that. The bylaw can, as amended, respond to that in ways that will permit it, but provide some discipline and several steps of review. So we're quite happy to have completed several years of hard work, and I guess the other reason I wanted to stand up on this occasion is this will probably be my last opportunity to address council. My term on the board will soon be up, and I'm looking forward to supporting a new chair shortly as we move into the new year. But so I'll thank council for its support of the heritage conservation area initiatives over the last several years, and encourage you to pass these amendments this evening.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Boyce. Any questions for Mr. Boyce? Okay, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Oh, sorry, sorry, Deputy, 1 second, sorry, something, there you go.
I just want to say thank you to Bob, who's been very dedicated to heritage and many other projects for a number of years. So, thank you, Bob, for everything done.
Mr. Boyce, we may have another question for you. Councillor Reardon had a question, sorry. You snuck away on me there. So, Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. I don't have a question for you, Bob. I do want to also thank Bob, though, because he came onto the board at a difficult time when we were in a lot of flux and we were down to one heritage officer, which was Alice Fudge, and she was new on the job, and it was through Bob's guidance and his leadership. He had initiated this whole heritage development area. I believe we were part of the founding core, wasn't it, Bob, years ago?
That's a long time ago. I don't like
A long
to be
time
reminded.
ago. But bringing that expertise at a time when we needed it, it was great, and he was a great mentor for staff. And I found that he's always been reasonable. I worked on the board with him in my last term as a councillor. He's always been reasonable. He's been a great leader. And so I just wanted to publicly thank you as well, because I think, you know, it's not always easy to sit on a board where you're given a set of rules that you really have very limited ability to have some flexibility with. You're really just there to sort of, you know, it's council's rules, and you're really just there to enforce them. So it can be not always easy, and Bob and his team has done a great job. So just want to publicly say thanks, Bob. I'll be looking for a spot for you on another board, you know that, right?
So, and just before you go away, Bob, I just wondered, Common Clerk, is it appropriate, are we able to get a legal opinion about having Bob be the chair for the rest of his life on the Heritage Board? No, okay, never mind, okay. He's quickly slipping away. Thank you very much, Mr. Boyce. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, Councillor Reardon. Okay, and I'll ask again if there's anyone wishing to speak in favor of the Saint John Heritage Conservation Area Bylaw Phase 2 amendments. Okay, thank you. Could tell us your name for the record, please?
Yes, good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Steve Carson. I'm with Develop Saint John. As you know, Develop Saint John was established almost 2 years ago now to help instigate private sector investment and drive tax-based growth in the city. We see this, we're certainly fully supportive of the amendments before you this evening, and we see this as a really important milestone in reaching the full potential of our uptown and our ability to attract investment. As urban development evolves, we know about changing consumer tastes, design practices, building code requirements, so too must our heritage bylaw, and this is a great step to ensure that happens. It provides a predictability and clarity for developers looking to fill the gaps in historic streetscapes. We've spent a lot of time with our development community over the last 24 months, and this certainly goes a long way to rectifying a lot of the challenges that they've been faced with in the past. So we believe that this proposed bylaw really strikes that, has been referred to tonight, that delicate balance that recognizes the important role of our heritage character in creating that unique sense of place that we have in our community, but also recognizing the technical challenges of urban infill development.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from Mr. Carson? Not seeing any. Thank you very much. Okay, I'll ask again if there's anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the Saint John Heritage Conservation Bylaw Phase 2 amendments. Okay, and I'll ask a final time if there's anyone wishing to speak in favor of these amendments. Okay, not seeing any.
I'll move first reading of the Phase 2 amendment.
Okay, thank you. Common Clerk, did you want to just jump in? Thank you.
Your Worship, just procedurally, there is a staff recommendation as well, so I would recommend to approve the staff recommendation and then first and second.
Okay, thank you. Moved by the deputy, second by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you on the staff recommendation. I'll call the question on that first, please. Oh, excuse me. Thank you. Councillor Reardon, I apologize.
Okay.
Question?
So with the staff recommendation with this, what does that include?
It's on the screen.
Which one? Okay, sorry. Okay, one adopt. Yeah. Okay, all right. Sure. No, because I want to talk about. I'm not going for 249 Douglas Avenue.
Okay. So just in terms of Ms. Hamilton or Ms. Sampson's going to speak to. So what it
Or I have a couple of
includes is-
questions, anyways.
Okay.
Before, let's say before that.
Okay,
So,
so just for clarity, folks, what is on the floor is this recommendation as written. Okay, so do you want to ask your question, Councillor? About
I have a
that?
couple of questions actually about the whole kit. So on page 6 of the report, it says that for setbacks and side yards, et cetera, it says elements of a new development or addition that are stepped back from the primary massing or street wall, those elements are exempt from any standards on design and articulation, windows and materials. So does that mean if I apply for a variance, I have, how does that work if I've applied for a variance for a setback?
From page 6?
Page 6 on your, page 5 actually on your report. It's called general provisions.
All right, just give me a moment here.
For all developments, building setbacks and side yards will match the general trend of the block face. That they're exempt from standards. I don't know if I'm reading that right, they're exempt from standards. I don't know if that means that they'll have to be part of the, they'll match the general trend on the block face, or if they're going to be exempt from the general trend on the block face if they have applied for a variance to be stepped back.
If they are stepped back from their street wall, so you have your primary massing and then an upper story, it would step back. Elements that are stepped back and above would be exempt.
What if I applied to have my whole building stepped back? I'm just worried about, I guess, someone's just applying for a setback and then, and not conforming with the rest of. Anyways, I guess it isn't really going to matter that much if you're going to have the tiers. We're getting away from the replication now.
We'll have
Yes,
Miss,
if the whole
Miss-
building was contemporary.
Right.
I think to lend a little bit of clarity, we have building setbacks, which is the main location of the building on a lot. And then the step back would be at an upper story.
Right.
So if the building meets its setbacks, there's no issue there. If it is a bit more contemporary, if it was, say, 10 feet back from the lot, that would likely be considered a tier 3, but there would be zoning considerations that would trump that.
Okay.
Miss Hamilton, I think wanted to jump in as well, perhaps, just to.
Sampson addressed it. I think the
Okay.
step back, the difference is that it's above the building, the base of the building. So we're not talking about stepping it back from the property line. This is a building that steps back from the face of a building, so it's not as visible at the street level. And it's, I believe, meant to provide a little bit more flexibility in those situations.
So I just want to make sure I'm following along. Set back and step back are two different, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you.
The other question I had was about signage in there, and it's it's probably like on page 40-something of my kit, but it talks about signage. So you don't need a heritage permit if you want to advertise that you have a space for rent, an apartment for rent, it says, or if you're having work done, you're putting the permit up in your window to have work done. But what about, one thing that I do get a lot of complaints about is management companies that post their signs outside on of the building and have hammered them into your brick or whatever. I couldn't find anything in there in regards to that. So I guess what I'm wondering is about that, and are there what the consequences would be for that, because they have cropped up quite a bit over the last little bit.
Yes, so that was a consideration that we included in the first phase of amendments. That was a new clause at that point. And we did specifically, we exempted property management from the exemption. So that is something that would still require a heritage permit to be put in place and would be enforceable if done without a heritage permit.
It's just that they're not great, even if you need a permit to put them up, they're still pretty homely.
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I did have a couple of questions about 249 Douglas Avenue, if I
Yes.
can ask those. So what I'm curious about with those, it says in the kit that it was posted for sale in 2017, or they got the demolition permit in 2017 because they have been posted for sale. So when it was posted for sale, I know in those days it was 6 months, now it's up to a year. But was it at fair market price, and who determines that? Who had determined that?
This project was actually before my time with the city, but
Okay.
to the best of my knowledge, everything was done accordingly to the bylaw with regards to the provision for sale. The applicant did have the property listed for 12 months rather than 6 with no purchaser. And at this point, they have well exceeded, even though it's a vacant lot, any sale provision to that end. But everything with regards to the demolition permit was done appropriately.
So I'm just wondering, like that, fair market value is kind of nebulous. I don't know if that's the assessed price or what. And did you know if the owner had owned it for a long time? Or or if he had bought a vacant building?
That is a good question. I believe it was
Oh, I
vacant 2 years before.
2 years before. And do you know what the sale price of it is now?
It is, I believe, just under 50,000. They have lowered it a number of times
Okay.
in the year and a half it's been listed as a lot.
I have a struggle with this because, and I know to take it off of there would be the best thing for that owner, but at the end of the day, I say to myself, this is the best thing for Douglas Avenue, which is kind of just getting its wings as far as becoming this heritage area where it's got a lot of holes in the streetscape that are not heritage yet, and some of them that are. And is it fair to the owners along that street who are invested in the street and are trying to do the right things with their buildings, and there's some beautiful historic buildings along there, is it fair to them then to have this property delisted with really, probably will have no building standards then on it? I mean, we've seen some pretty bad things. We see the Danka building up there where a beautiful old general hospital used to be. So I guess that's what I'm worried about, is you could put something that looks like a, you know, a large shed there and it would be fine. So I'm worried about taking it, delisting it, because at least if it's listed, we'll have this tier system which will ensure that the neighborhood gets a quality investment in another project. So that's why I don't want to go for the request for removal of 429 Douglas Avenue. So I can't go against this whole thing because I'm for everything except for that one little tiny component.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think there's that many buildings on Douglas Avenue that are in the heritage area, are there? How many?
So,
Okay, I wasn't looking at it, I guess. All the blue ones are heritage?
Yep.
Yep. Okay, thank you.
okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. There's no other request to speak, so the recommendation is on the floor, so I'll call the question. All those in... Well, so we have the recommendation on the floor. You can do a couple things. You can, sorry, Common Clerk, you're looking at me with...
Yeah, Your Worship, there are
eyes.
two recommendations here. One is to adopt the policy,
Right.
and the other is to give first and second reading.
Right.
So those could be broken up. The first and second reading could be voted
No,
on
no.
separately.
Yeah, but sorry, first we're addressing the staff recommendation.
It has two parts, though.
Right,
So Part A would be the first and second reading, and Part B would be the historic place designation policy.
I understand. So, but I think specific to the counselor's question, she's asking, can I take the item specifically to 249 Douglas Avenue out of this recommendation?
No, because that would change the bylaw amendment. That's part of the bylaw amendment, is my understanding.
That's correct. That's what the commissioner's telling us. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. But you can vote openly in any way you'd like, Counselor. Right, so, okay, folks, thank you. I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Okay, thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you. The motion. Once in every 4-year term, you do get to vote twice. So you've just used your, thank you.
I'll move first reading on the Phase 2 amendments.
Okay, thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. First reading, and I see no lights, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any. Thank you.
A law to amend the Saint John Heritage Conservation Area bylaw.
Thank you.
Second reading.
Thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. And on the question, I'll call it. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary-minded? Not seeing any.
A law to amend the Saint John Heritage Conservation Areas bylaw.
Thank you very much. Okay, and next item, please.
Next item on the agenda, Your Worship, is a public hearing. It's for the proposed municipal plan and zoning bylaw amendments, Central Peninsula Plan. And there is a staff presentation and Planning Advisory Committee report recommending the amendments. And Commissioner Hamilton would like to say a few opening remarks.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Commissioner.
Your Worship, I'll be brief. I've already provided the overview this evening, but I did want to introduce Mr. Andrew Reed, who will be delivering the presentation on the Central Peninsula Neighborhood Plan and the related amendments to the municipal plan and the zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hamilton. And Mr. Reed, we will, if I can find the podium. There you are, sir. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm very pleased to present to you tonight the Central Peninsula Secondary Plan. I can say from a personal point of view, having been involved at each stage of its development, that there is a high level of commitment within the city and the community to this plan, and to realize its vision for a mixed-income, vibrant, dense city core.
Thank you.
Before beginning, it's crucial to recognize, once again, because they can't get enough recognition, the key contributors and funders of the plan. So key to its development and promotion has been the Neighborhood Action Team, and we're joined here tonight by a number of its members, Kay Gillis, Ann, Tisington, Melissa Wakefield, and our two councillors, Councillor Reardon and Councillor Hickey. In addition, we thank all of the others involved, including the citizen and stakeholder involvement, which was tremendous. Council and Growth Committee have shown a key interest in seeing this plan through, and we are pleased to deliver on this council priority. Finally, I'd better recognize the funders, primarily being the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Uptown Saint John, and the province of New Brunswick for their contributions. To give a quick overview of the project, the aim of the secondary plan is simply to give a more detailed level of planning direction within the Central Peninsula Plan area. So what does this mean? It means championing and improving upon its unique strengths and assets like public squares, waterfront, arts and culture, the challenges such as state of infrastructure, and opportunities like repurposing vacant lots and derelict buildings. It means clarity and simplicity on key design features, enabling investment and consistency across the peninsula. It means modernization of heritage and development approval processes, inviting a new era of investment and ownership. The ability to target and measure the neighborhood's progress for years to come. And it means building investor confidence through strategic capital planning and aspirational growth concepts, all while ensuring a mixed income, vibrant, dense community. So the plan is a key document in delivery of improvements to the city's zoning bylaw, as well as a number of additional deliverables, including a community action strategy, capital strategy, urban design, and public realm design guidelines. As Emma mentioned, the development of the plan has been closely coordinated with the Heritage Conservation Areas Bylaw. Phase 1 now complete, Phase 2 tonight well on its way. Better coordination of heritage and planning will ensure a more cohesive vision for the city core, and the Heritage Board has been integral to achieving this goal. Finally, there are a number of other documents linked to the plan, including Move SJ, Play SJ, population growth strategies, arts and culture, climate change, and smart growth strategies. To give you a bit of a view of the development of the plan, it's been on the books for the past 3 years, officially kicking off last May in 2017. An extensive community engagement program continuing the footsteps of Plan SJ has set this secondary plan on a very solid foundation. This program was created in partnership with neighborhood stakeholders so that its success would be ensured. A multitude of methods were utilized to reach as many people as possible, online and offline. Traditional workshops and open house by invitation were complemented by pop-up engagements within each of the neighborhoods of the secondary plan. Engagement reached out to a wide variety of audiences, including newcomers, prospective buyers, business owners, youth, basically anywhere people gathered in the Central Peninsula. This approach really complemented the more formal engagement workshops held, such as the Plan Summit in the summer of 2018. Engagement results were compiled into 3 What We Heard reports, which were reported back to Council. And this is a summary of the engagement results. Over 2,000 comments serve as a database for the plan, and all of this speaks to the fact that there is a widespread knowledge out there about the plan, that something great is in the works, and that this plan represents a shared aspiration in the community. Many of the ideas and comments were refined and prioritized by the Neighborhood Action Team and stakeholders to inform plan policy, or to be addressed through the Community Action Strategy, or to inform capital projects. These are just a few of the themes that we heard throughout the engagement. Following the engagement phase, a vision was established and a draft plan developed. The vision is for the Central Peninsula to be the most complete community in Atlantic Canada, and to emerge as a reinvigorated heart of the region and one of the top places to live in the Maritimes. To accompany the vision, growth targets were set based on a population increase of between 2,400 and 3,000 residents over the next 30 years. These targets were carefully considered and are achievable. There's a certain capacity for even more growth within the Central Peninsula. The population targets are also accompanied by new residential units, businesses, jobs, and tax-based growth. In terms of the makeup of the secondary plan, it's divided into 3 main neighborhoods and includes policies and proposals which council may undertake for the Uptown, South End, and Waterloo Village. Growth concepts for these neighborhoods detail possible build-out scenarios, future land uses, and improvements to public realm spaces. In addition, key corridors also are given direction to transition land uses with an emphasis on active transportation corridors and increasing connectivity. Building and design policies aim to foster a more cohesive urban environment in coordination with heritage approval processes for infill. New provisions and amendments will create more clarity and predictability and anticipate future direction, such as a design review committee and bonus zoning bylaw. The community action strategy is not a legislative component of the plan, but is very important to bringing it to life. This strategy builds on collective impact and grassroots planning and is a major implementation piece for the plan. For this strategy to be successful, community involvement will be key to realizing the vision of the plan. Finally, implementation of the plan is coordinated through a 5-year action plan that primarily focuses on capital projects, a monitoring framework, and capital strategy, which was approved by council earlier this year, and is already underway on items including improvements to Rainbow Park, addressing garbage issues, greening, and the pedestrianization of South Market Street. It's also been a testament to the influence of the plan that the capital budget for 2020 was looked at through the lens of the plan. In summary, the plan will create the following: a new progressive 30-year vision, aspirational growth concepts, a clear and predictable development framework with a focus on design, modernization of heritage and development approval processes, partnering with the community, strategic capital planning, and targeted measurements of progress. To give a recap of the formal legislative approval process and the next steps, this process began in October with a public presentation of the plan adoption and municipal plan amendments, which concluded the 30-day public comment period in November. We'd received 3 letters of support at the close of this period. Last month, council referred the plan to the Planning Advisory Committee, and at the PAC meeting, there were 4 members of the public in support of the plan, and the committee voted unanimously for its approval. We will be hoping to secure 3rd reading in January, with a copy of the plan finalized and approval of the community action strategy. Subsequent to enactment of the plan, council will continue to play a role in implementing the secondary plan through the considerations of its policy and in monitoring. In terms of the municipal plan amendments that accompany the plan, there are 20 in total, and these address updating parking policy, a policy to reflect growth concepts, active transportation policy, and heritage policy, as well as to reflect the new Community Planning Act. A lot of the updates involve changes to preamble just to sync up the 2 planning documents. In terms of the amendments to the zoning bylaw, there are also 20 amendments proposed. And a principal theme here is to build on the urban design policies of Plan SJ regarding building massing, design, and appearance. These provisions intend to create clarity on maximum heights by taking height out of heritage, where it was previously in 2 bylaws, and balancing the need for density with the desire for compatibility and sense of place in heritage areas. A maximum height map concentrates height to where it currently exists or where it can be accommodated, and general provisions ensure a human scale across the peninsula, but also allow for flexibility. Amendments to the parking exemption area provisions will remove barriers for growth by no longer requiring on-site parking within this area. This move was anticipated during the development of Plan SJ, and with the evidence provided through the Move SJ project, this amendment can now proceed. Amendments to the Uptown Commercial Zone will create additional flexibility to increase residential density while protecting commercial core ground floor uses through a targeted approach. Amendments to the Urban Center Residential Zone, that's the predominant residential zone in the Central Peninsula, will address the missing middle in dwelling units, which is townhouses, a dwelling form that is encouraged in the Central Peninsula as an affordable, compact, family-friendly form. These amendments intend to facilitate more modern-style townhouses on narrow lots through new appearance standards. Finally, amendments to the commercial waterfront zone are intended to capitalize on the public's desire to see incremental use of waterfront land, as demonstrated by the growth concept for this area, and also retain control over urban design in these key public access areas through an integrated development process. The Central Peninsula Plan process has helped begin a conversation about positive change and what our city's unique value proposition is as a place to live, work, and play. The past 3 years have shown the value of construction and permits consistently rising over previous years, and there is a steady increase in development interest, with an estimated 170 new units planned for 2020 or 2021. The planning process has also helped lay the groundwork for initiatives like the Central Peninsula School and fund a key development, and will continue to influence other important intergovernmental initiatives to achieve a mixed-income, vibrant community and secure the vision as one of the top places to live in Atlantic Canada. This is a summary of the public participation as required by legislation that was conducted tonight. Want to keep playing that? In conclusion, the recommendation is before you. I think there's much to be excited about here tonight. In many ways, St. John's optimism is being built off this geographic area. This optimism is not limited to the city core, though, although it's hard to argue that it's not concentrated here the highest. This enthusiasm is due to spread and to be treated with future initiatives, and the hope is that the Central Peninsula can serve as a template for those initiatives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that presentation. Okay, we'll open up the public hearing, and I'll invite anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the proposed municipal plan and zoning bylaw amendments for the Central Peninsula to come forward. Okay, I'll ask, oh, sorry, yeah, thank you. You can come to the podium, please, and give us your name for the record.
Hi, I'm Andrew Johnson. There's just some points of clarification I just want.
Okay.
We didn't address the infrastructure proposals within the amendment, particularly the recommendations for Crown Street and for the streets from Place 400 to, well, the viaduct. So I just wanted some point of clarification. Was that part of what was going on?
Sorry, just want to make, I'm just trying, from, did you say, sorry, Mr. Johnson, from Crown to?
Well, from my understanding, we are planning on reducing those to 2 lanes and having a 3rd lane as a right and a left turn only lane, and that is the direction the city is trying to go in order to be an urban city. And that seems rather foolish if we want to keep traffic flow and care about the environment, since we're going to increase wait times. Anyways, just...
Okay, just let me ask a point of clarity, because I'm not sure. In terms of Common Clerk, I need to look to you, I guess, for a bit of guidance. Normally, we would have questions. If we can't answer them, my thought is we would we would note them, and then after the public hearing, we would try to clarify with staff those questions. Okay, so thank you. So just, unfortunately, our process doesn't allow for a back and forth between
Not a
yourselves and
problem.
staff, but if you wanted to give us your series of feedback, we'll make notes and we'll try to get, so I just want to make sure I captured appropriately. Again, I apologize. So really, your question was around traffic flow and road diets and what that might do to congestion. Is that, did I
Well,
capture that?
There is that issue on the additional congestion does increase the amount of CO2 in your air, so you don't really want that from environmental. And with our traffic times being quite great, our roads are being A or maybe a B road. They're a great grade of a road, so you don't want to ruin that
Okay.
and degrade your road because your real estate value can go down. Everything can go down. It's just not a good idea.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
so
I've
that was
captured
on-
that one. Okay.
Those two streets. And primarily the rest is reasonable. It's just you don't seem to actually focus on anything like educational initiatives, helping the locals actually achieve lower operating costs, things that actually, help the bottom dollar so that they could have more money to pay for more taxes and things like that. It seemed a little lacking in certain areas.
Okay.
Anyways, there is a copy of my comments, Don, so.
Yeah, in the file. Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Okay, sorry, any questions for Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I've got a question.
No, sorry, doesn't work that way, sorry. Okay, thank you. From council, sorry, in a public hearing, it's an exchange between council members and the participant, okay. But you folks can meet in the coffee shop. Okay, perfect, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'll ask if, and sorry, I think we're on the opposition. Yeah, thank you. Sorry, lost track there. Okay, I'll ask again if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to the amendments. Okay, thank you. So just come on up to the podium and give us your name for the record, please. And
Hi. For the record, I'm Devin Stackhouse. I don't have a problem with any of the content. I guess I'm noting an omission. I feel like it should include social housing targets. If we don't have those and we have a development plan, it's kind of a roadmap for gentrification without concern for displacement. And I think it would be prudent to include social housing targets.
okay. Okay, thank you. Comment captured, thank you. Okay, I'll ask if there's anyone else wishing to give us feedback or speak in opposition to the amendments. Okay, and I'll ask one final time if there's anyone wishing to speak in opposition to these amendments. Okay, thank you. I'll flip to the other side. Is there anyone wishing to speak in favor of these amendments? Okay.
Me.
After 2 years.
2.5
27
years.
pizzas, yeah,
Yeah.
okay, perfect. Thank you, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Kay Gillis, and I'm the chair, almost ending the tenure as the chair of the Neighborhood Action Team. I just want to thank everybody. I want to thank members of the team. I want to thank city staff and everybody who really contributed to this, which is significantly from our community, the community that we live in, the community that a lot of us work in. And I think the reason why we're all behind this plan 100% is because this really is reflective of what we've heard over the past 2.5, nearly 3 years. I think it reflects what we heard, the ideas that we developed, and I think it's a real roadmap for growth, which is something everybody here is really behind. And I think one of the things that was true at the beginning, was true during the process, and it is true moving forward, is that this is a plan, yes, for the Central Peninsula, but I think that sort of growth, the view that it brings into the city of Saint John itself radiates outwards. So this is not something that just benefits one neighborhood, it benefits all. And so I thank you all for your consideration, for your support of the plan over a number of years, and I look forward to you voting in favor of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Any quotes? Sorry, Ms. Gillis, we do have a couple of questions for you.
Sure.
Thank you. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. I just want to publicly thank Kay for taking on this job. It was a big job 2.5 years ago, and when we got into a slump there for a little bit and we felt like we weren't moving forward, she rallied the troops and she rallied staff, and we got back on the train again. She led us through this. She led us through. This is the fourth city planner we've had on the job, and they've all brought great skills. We started with Jeff Sear. He was fantastic. We went to Jody Clifford next, and then he left. He was great. We had Jen Brown. She was fantastic. And now we've got Andy, and he's been, you know, he's going to get all the credit for this, of course, because he's, he's signing off on it. But Andy's been great too. So it's been, and we got Nancy Tisington and Ann McShane and Melissa Wakefield are here tonight to support it as well. We've been on the team, so it's been a really great project. It's been an intense project. Been a lot of work, a lot of meetings, a lot of. I've been to most of those public engagement sessions, so it's been a lot, but I've learned a lot as well, and so I'm fairly familiar with the document. Social housing is something that we've talked about in the document as well. We had talked about as a group, so it's all those things. So I just want to say thanks again, Kay. Really appreciate your, and I'll be looking for another job for you, Shirley, as well.
Perfect. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and certainly just want to echo Councillor Reardon's message. I can't really take any credit at all for the work put into this. I joined the team at a really opportune time. I came, the first meeting I showed up to, they were taking pictures for the front of the completed report. So it was, I came in at an opportune time to support a really good, plan. And I guess what I was going to ask, Kay, is if you could identify the people of the team that are in the room so we get some recognition.
Melissa Wakefield, Ann McShane, Nancy Tisington, and really all of the members of the Planning and Growth Department. Just amazing to work with. Always open to having conversations and sitting down to talk with us, and having an open door policy. So we really appreciate that. And it was definitely a passion project for all of us.
Yeah, and certainly to the earlier point about the Shadow Laurier in Ottawa, or is it the Rideau? Anyway, one of them. This plan is to make sure that we don't end up with something like that, because that looks like a Star Trek movie smashed into a Disney princess in the middle of downtown Ottawa. It's horrible. So the goal is that we, end up with really good mix on the three tiers of development in the city. So thanks very much.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan.
Thanks, Your Worship. Thanks, Kate, and your team for all your work. As the chair of this, perhaps for those of us who haven't been as intimately involved, can you respond to some of the concerns that have been brought forward, social housing and the streets moving into the uptown?
Yeah, so the streets moving into the uptown, I mean, that's something, I can't speak to exactly the particulars about how, sort of the theory behind it, because that is not my expertise.
Sure.
But the reasoning behind those things is to create a feel of community, and that's something that we heard, right? Like, there are a number of streets around our neighborhoods that have exponential speed. Like, if you look at Lower Cove Loop, you look at Crown Street, these large corridors are not conducive to community, right? And that's something that we heard over and over from our public gatherings, right? Is people bomb through these neighborhoods. And the reason they do it is because they have ample space to do it. So when we spoke together as a team, we heard from the public. That's when you look at different ways to kind of manage traffic. It's not reducing the flow. It's not things like that. It's how do you reduce, or how do you manage traffic, manage the flow of cars coming into and out of a city in a manageable way that is not going to have a negative impact, but is going to benefit the community. And that's the lens that we looked at this plan through. In terms of social housing, that has absolutely been top of mind for us as well. We spoke at length. We have absolutely had those conversations about managing growth without leaving people behind and without gentrification in our neighborhoods. Definitely there are things that are outside the scope of the city of what they can do. And so there are definite actions in our plan which talk about the city has to be working with the province to kind of push those social housing targets more. So as much as we could impact that, that absolutely came up time and again. So we hear you, and whatever we could do to influence that within the plan, we have done.
Thank you. Thank you, Worship.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Merrithew.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Kay, for the work you've done, but I also have concerns regarding the social housing, and especially Mr. Johnson makes some very, very good points on traffic flow. And so when I look at you reducing the flows in Crown Street, Main Street, City Road, these are pretty vibrant roads. And have you had somebody with professional expertise in traffic flow or traffic management look at this?
I would send that back.
Yeah,
to
so we'll-
Jacqueline. Like, that's, I mean, personally, have I engaged somebody? No. But
Okay.
I believe that was all done through.
Perhaps
the
you
We'll
send it
deal
off
with
to staff.
place, yeah, if you don't mind,
I'll send
Councillor.
it back to staff then.
Yeah,
Thank you.
yeah. I mean, definitely there are expertise, there's expertise built into that about what that could look like. It wouldn't be done willy-nilly, but again, those are things that we heard, right? Is that when you have 4, 5, 6 lanes of traffic, what does that do to a community, right? It kind of splits it up. And so what are the ways to best manage that? And that is what is addressed in this plan, right? A community isn't a drive-through. A community is a place where you live and you work and you play. And so finding that right balance and striking that balance is what this plan addresses.
And we'll save your question, please, Councillor. We'll come back to staff for the more
Thank you.
technical.
Yep, thank you.
Anything else, sir?
No, thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. Councillor Reardon, did you want to jump back in for a minute?
Yeah, and all I was going to say about roads, it's always the same old story with roads of how do you mitigate the impact of commuters on a neighborhood. And, really what you want to do is support the people that live in your community because they're invested in it and they're invested in it from all kinds of perspectives and especially money because they've bought homes and they live there. So I guess that's where a lot of that comes from. And every community is the same. I mean, Milledgeville, they just are putting in a roundabout for the same reason, right? Traffic is too fast there. So every community wants some safety for their kids and for their so they can live and play in that community. So I guess that's how you mitigate that.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay, we'll come back to that. Okay, thank you. Councillor Armstrong, do you have a question for Ms. Gillis?
No, I have
Okay.
one for Jacqueline.
No, we're still
Okay.
in the public hearing. So,
Thank
okay,
you.
well, thank you very much, Ms. Gillis, for your leadership. Thank you.
Thank you very
Okay.
much, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, I'll ask if there's anyone else wishing to speak in favor of these amendments. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak in favor of the amendments, specifically the road one. I live just off Crown on Orange Street, and I absolutely drive around Lower Cove Loop and Crown Street going 70. Everyone does it.
You're lucky.
But that's got a lot of negative consequences. It's really brutal on properties along Crown Street. We're all familiar with that giant 1 block long stretch on Princess that's been for sale forever. There's vacant lots everywhere along it. And I mean, we're talking about Main Street and the importance of it as a commercial corridor. Has anyone been on Main Street lately? There's a McDonald's, a hockey rink, and an office building. That's it. It's vacant lots. It's a hillside. And I mean, it parallels Hilliard. Hilliard already connects to the overpass.
Right.
So I just don't think there's a point in keeping all these 6-lane roads that run between another 4-lane road and a 4-lane highway open. And I mean, Crown Street too, look how much empty office space and rundown public housing there is down there. Like, I mean, City Road, it's a vibrant corridor. Buildings burn down on City Road every 6 months and nobody ever builds anything again. It's, I think we should be a lot more concerned about filling these places with people and having fewer commuters and more people that live inside these neighborhoods and bigger, better neighborhoods that aren't filled with vacant space than we should be with traffic flow and mitigating, like, I don't know, a minuscule amount of carbon. Because, for idling on Main Street for 30 seconds is China builds a new coal plant every 3 months, so it's a bit silly to care about that. But I just want to say I think the road plan's great for the city. I think it's good to condense it. I mean, 3 lanes should be enough. You can go down Main Street at rush hour and there's nobody on it. You'll have to wait 2 minutes to turn left. So I think if anybody's concerned about the state of our roads, they should remember that they were built for a city of 250,000 people. And especially with the highway that sliced the city in half and caused the collapse of the downtown core in the first place. I don't think we really need more multi-lane roads coming into the uptown. And, you know, we should slow traffic on places like Crown as well, but that'll help develop it. But I think the entrance points, they can be choked a little bit. It's not like we're going to end up with traffic backed up 100 kilometers. There's only so many people out in the suburbs, and there's fewer every year. But that's about all, thanks.
Oh, one sec, we may have a question here for you, Councillor Hickey. Question?
I'm just going to add a comment in support of what you said there, because when you talk about these major corridors, limiting them, what that does is reduce the amount of traffic on them. Because me, who lives in the North End and comes into the Central Peninsula, instead of grabbing my car keys every time and driving across a viaduct, now I'm going for my bike. And now I'm going to walk, because there's a lane of active transportation. So in essence, I mean, I would refer to the experts, but in essence, the hope is that you actually lower the amount of traffic that's on the street, you slow it down, and you make it a better community. And that is exactly what you're saying, and it's exactly what it's about.
Yeah. In addition to that, too, if traffic gets so bad that people are mad about it, maybe people will live where they don't have to commute, which
Preach
is
it, brother.
kind of the
You
goal
got
of this
it.
anyway, right?
Yeah, you
All right,
got it.
That's all from me, thanks.
Perfect, thank you. Just need your address for that ticket. Oh, the chief of police isn't here. You're good. You're good. You don't live here. Yeah. You live in the valley. Okay, perfect. Thank you. And I'll ask again if there's anyone wishing to speak in favor of these amendments. Okay, thank you. You two look familiar, sir.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Steve Carson with Develop St. John. We're obviously very excited about the Central Peninsula Secondary Plan. We see our role as an organization, by a large extent, helping bring that plan to life, and we're really happy to report that, you know, after the last 24 months, and although the plan not fully adopted yet, we have been able to use a lot of the material, including a lot of the data that's been developed through this process to help attract and encourage investment in our urban core. So we're experiencing more and more inquiries and expressions of interest in developing in the neighborhood, which is really reflective of that momentum. So just some of the exciting projects that are already public include the development of the parking lot at the corner of Canterbury Street and Granny Lane into the Telegraph, a new 6-story wood frame mixed commercial and 32-unit residential development. The conversion of the former Salvation Army into a beautiful neo-industrial oceanside urban loft apartments, which are fully occupied, which support the repositioning of St. James Street as a key east-west corridor to focus reinvestment. The transformation of the Gothic Arches site on Wentworth Street into a new 70-80 unit high-end residential development. We had high private sector interest in investing and developing the Fundy Key project, obviously, which just at last council meeting resulted in the Fundy Key Development, Inc. Entering in an option agreement with the city for that 6-acre site on our waterfront. And as Andy mentioned earlier, the plans currently underway for a new innovative urban K-8 school designed to contribute to transforming the Central Peninsula into a mixed-income neighborhood have all been the results of the foundation laid by and the work that's gone over the last couple of years. So we fully support the City of St. John's Central Peninsula Secondary Plan.
The mic is not on. Thank you, Mr. Carson. Any questions? No? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Is there anyone else wishing to speak in favor of these amendments? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening, councillors. My name is Melissa Wakefield, and as been mentioned a few times tonight, I came to be a part of the neighborhood plan with a few different hats, both as a member of the neighborhood action team, as a member of the Heritage Development Board, but also as a stakeholder. I'm a young architect here in the city, and I think with that hat on, it's why I'm most excited with tonight's public hearing and the future for St. John. When I became a member of the action team, I was a relative newcomer to St. John, and that was 3 years ago nearly now. And with the onslaught of the design guidelines and the revisions to the infill standards and the heritage bylaws as a whole, it gives me a lot of hope and excitement as a young architect working in this city. I didn't know where my career was going to take me, but as I'm developing my architectural practice here in the city, I'm really excited to continue to be here and be part of the ongoing development and foster design excellence in this community, which I think is really what the core and crux of the urban design guidelines and the infill standards and all of those design pieces are really all about. So,
Well,
thanks.
Perfect, thank you. That was recorded, right? So we can play that in our commercial for attracting professionals to our beautiful city. Thank you very much, Melissa. I don't see any questions for you. Thank you. Okay, I'll ask again if there's anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the amendments tonight. Okay, and I'll ask one final time if there's anyone wishing to speak in favor of the amendments tonight. Okay, not seeing anyone else. Can we just get into some staff questions just before we move to that, or we can put them on the floor. Sorry, Deputy. Thank you. Okay, you move. Okay, moved and seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. And Councillor Merrithew, to you first.
I'll just, the same question I posed to Kay a second ago. I should have posed to staff. My apologies. The question is, have we looked at has an expert looked at the traffic flow and traffic management of these particular streets in the plan?
Okay, thank you. We'll get Ms. Hamilton on the line here, or Mr.
Doesn't matter.
Sorry, Ms. Hamilton. There we go.
Your Worship, through you to the councillor, certainly the questions about the corridors, both Crown Street and Main Street, are a fundamental component of the plan. In fact, there are corridor plans integrated into the neighborhood plan. They were the recommendations around road diets and intensification of those corridors were vetted fully through the MOVE SJ process. So we worked hand in hand with the consultants that developed MOVE SJ, as well as our own transportation staff who vetted the recommendations included here. And certainly the concepts are about moving those corridors to provide alternate. They were overbuilt in the era of urban renewal in the 1950s and 60s, and the concepts here are about providing for alternative modes of transportation, as well as opportunities for intensification, so you have more opportunities for people to live and work in these areas. So certainly that will lessen the impact on the street infrastructure as well. And it is a trend we're seeing in many other communities throughout North America. Halifax is moving ahead with demolition of the Cogswell interchange is one that the council may have heard of. And we're following on best practice really across North America.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Armstrong.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I guess two things about the traffic. You got to remember, it was a working port. We had the Sugar Shack, and you didn't have the throughway, the new interchange. So every transport truck had to come down Crown Street, turn left to get out to the oil refinery, and all those salt trucks that you got down there was there too. So let's not make the roads too small. I understand where everybody's coming from, but there's still a working port here in Saint John, New Brunswick. And who knows what the future is. If we cut it off, you leave no options. Anyway, my other question is, with the housing in Uptown Saint John, and this is for Jacqueline, do we have a proportion of what should be? Because no offense, but I don't want all low-income housing in Uptown Saint John, because you know what? You don't have anybody with serious money to invest in the housing and the businesses here. So is there a proportion of how much there should be?
Oh, sorry, sorry, Ms. Hamilton. I
Need someone to rent those $1,500 apartments.
Ms. Hamilton.
So, Your Worship, through you to the councillor, really the thrust of this plan is around encouraging mixed income neighborhoods and striking the balance between affordable housing and market-driven housing. And really a key component of that is improving the supply of housing today. We have pent-up demand, and there's a desire for more high-quality units to meet that demand currently. So the plan touches on various facets related to affordable housing, and it also removes barriers for to enable certainly more affordable housing projects to be built. By eliminating red tape and reducing the costs of development also ensures that housing can be provided in a more affordable manner. So the target is really from mixed income. We do have the growth targets laid out in the plan, and we're trying to really achieve that balance is what the plan attempts to do.
But compared to other cities, is there a number? Is there like, should there be 20% or 30? Is there anything? I'm not talking about St. John, I'm talking about compared to other cities. Do they have a number they use that we could have downtown? Because just say some, government project comes here and wants to build another 400 units downtown. Is there a number? That's what I'm trying to get at, because then you've suffocated your expansion downtown. And that's why we don't have a grocery store.
Your Worship,
anymore.
through to the councillor, is not a particular number in
No.
terms of the percentage of affordable housing we're looking at. We do have targets related to 3,000 new people, 1,500 new units coming, and certainly we want to see a balance there. We want to see a mix of affordable housing provided as part of that. Certainly the incentives program that is currently available does target affordable housing as part of that. And the plan does talk about, as part of the implementation and monitoring strategy, about monitoring the proportion of and the cost of housing moving forward, so that we're ensuring that we do have that balance.
Okay, I know I put you on the spot, but I'm just curious if we have an exceptional number of downtown low-income housing units. I mean, as far as I know, we have the only waterfront subsidized housing on the planet. So I guess that's just something for food for thought for the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I just want to maybe add my comment now, maybe through to you, Ms. Hamilton, and to the councillor. Something that, we have a lot of very dedicated groups that have been building more affordable housing units. We have how much supply do we have, to your point now, Councillor? We know that there's a large waiting list. One of the things that I've had a conversation with both the MP and provincial representatives with, and Ms. Hamilton mentioned, although understanding that our workload is heavy here over the next 3-4 months, is perhaps one of the projects council could contemplate is what is that longer term housing strategy as well. So we have long-term financial plan, hopefully after the 16th of December. We have roadmaps for growth. We have a number of these plans, but I wonder about the value, or of the debate of the value of a long-term housing strategy, which looks at all forms of housing, transitional housing for those that are homeless, shelters, a variety of innovative type housing all through the supply, and certainly at a very, very high level. City manager, the MP believes that he probably could secure some dollars for us, but also being very cognizant of the fact that our work plan's pretty full. But something I've been passionate about is I believe that we need a longer term housing strategy, and I don't know, we don't have that today, and that would pull all those pieces together. So did you want to add any, City Manager, quick comment?
Your Worship, members of council, just one point to emphasize what the Commissioner mentioned. The plan is a living document. It will be amended as required and as we move forward. I'd offer that point up. And one of the key aspects on the housing side of it is the ongoing monitoring to make sure we get that correct balance. And we will tie in closely with organizations like HDC and other provincial bodies who, quite frankly, have the responsibility overall to address the challenge of low-income housing and homelessness, and work through that as we move forward. And I suspect that we will get to a point where we will have those discussions on a longer-term housing strategy for the city. We're just not there yet, and we have to monitor how the balance unfolds over the coming years.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Councillor Casey?
Thank you, Worship. I just have a few comments. I hope this... I know it's more expensive, but I hope it gears more towards real density. I'm not talking row houses. I'm talking high rises and stuff. Hope that's built in there somewhere. Because, I would rather have one high-rise building than 100 houses. Because then you can probably put a park in there, because you don't have all those houses taking up all that space. I don't know how you're going to do, we need a housing strategy. I don't know how you're going to make it mixed income. I don't think any city has had much luck at that. And you said market demand. Market demand is low income. So I don't really understand why the province and cities have to get involved in that and spend money on that. I think builders that build houses should just build them where people can afford them. Because, the person working cashier needs a place to live too. And if they don't live where they work, the city has to ship them. And that's gonna, that costs more on buses and roads and all that stuff. I like the more trees. I'd just like us to build up and clear some of that space for trees and public spaces. Everything else, it looks good. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Reed, can you just speak to density just for a moment? I mean, my sense reading this plan is it's all about density, and can you speak to that component just
Certainly,
quickly?
the councillor, through your worship, the aim of the plan would be to encourage density in the right places. That's by giving clarity and predictability to where you can put that multiple unit building, where that density would be permitted, and we've really tried to focus that around where it already exists. So a lot you'd see around the inner harbor, around the edges of parks, basically where it can be accommodated to give that predictability to investors and developers.
Okay, thank you. And I guess it's just my comment, having come from the industry. I think to your point, Councillor, on I just don't want to leave folks with the impression that building units, affordable units, is a very simple. It's a complex situation, and without the provincial and federal governments being involved in subsidies and helping those developers build those units so that they can be quote unquote affordable relative to the local markets, very difficult to do, because we're in an environment where codes and standards have driven costs up from my time in the industry by almost $50,000 to $60,000 per door, in other words, per apartment. So I just don't want to leave folks with the impression like, we can, it's a very simple, the provincial and federal governments have played active roles jurisdictionally in subsidizing affordable rental units, and they need to continue to play that role. So, okay, thank you. Councillor Reardon.
Thank you, Worship. I'll just say a couple of words about what's been said. Density is great. I'm completely supportive of it. But right now we penalize density because we don't pick up density as garbage. So we need to rethink how we can support density, if that's what we want. And I think we should have that. I'll just remind Council that I think we had 75 applications for this board. And Jacqueline may remember, and they did some selections. And so the two councillors, luckily, we got on. I was on with Jerry, and then you took Jerry's spot. But Ben Appleby of Saint John Alternative Housing was also on the board as that group as well. And the other thing is that we need, really what we need the province to go to is a mechanism where the subsidy follows the person. And that would be the best. And then you wouldn't have to worry about building different housing. You would, that's where that needs to go. Anyways, I can't solve that problem, but just throwing it out there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a thought on this. CMHC has a couple of really good programs right now, and they're trying to educate developers on them. And it's a national housing strategy, and there's a lot of money going into it. We're having a teach-in for developers here in the Saint John area. And I think by educating them on what's available will bring their expectations down a little bit and say, well, that means I don't have to build $2,500 apartments now. You know, so there is money out there to address that issue. And to Donna's point, you know, we have to be able to have a subsidy follow the person. Because if you're just going to keep putting up buildings and saying that's a low-income building, then you're always going to have, you know, you're not going to have mixed neighborhoods. So anyway, I think there are things being done with, you know, to the mayor's point, CMHC, HDC, NB Housing, St. John Nonprofit Housing. There's a lot of groups out there that are trying to address the issue. And I fully support this plan. I congratulate everybody, Kay, you and your team, for all the work you put into it, and staff. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say I do support the plan. Thank you for all your good work. And it's been a long time coming, but we've all worked on it, so thank you very much for that. And I just wanted to put in a plug for housing. St. John Nonprofit will be starting their building in the spring, and all government funding now has to be pretty much for mixed housing. It can't be just a building with low income, because we don't want that building to be identified as a low-income building. So it's all mixed. It's market value and it's low income, and it's much better that way. And I think the buildings in the uptown area, especially down on Spice Street, they work very well. The Admiral Beatty works well, Leinster Court. They have a mixture of citizens, low income, and high market value. So their new building on Wellington Row will be a great asset to the city when it happens in the spring.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy. And there's some other examples as well. There's building under construction by Tim Hortons East, by Simons High School. There's going to be a building on Peters Street. So there's a number of buildings. So, okay, thank you very much. A question, just I guess maybe more of a statement. In terms of road diets and active transportation, I know, Council, we also received, I just want to recognize from Nick Cameron a letter through the process, and it was more very, very complimentary, I think, of the plan, but in particular around active transportation. Nick he's not a fair weather cyclist like me. He's an all-weather cyclist, year-round cyclist. I'm sure his studded tires are on now, and he cycles from right here in the Peninsula, northwest, all over the city. And they have a very active St. John cycling community. So certainly to our staff, encourage us to continue to engage with, and I know they were engaged in the plan. The road diet from where we sit right now over to Main Street North couldn't happen sooner enough. I'd love to see that happen in the new year. I'd love to see the 2 inside lanes painted green for running, cycling, segwaying, golf carts, any other way to get to Main Street, because I think it could be one of the mechanisms to see a reinvestment in Main Street, in terms of some of the infill lot opportunities, hop on my bicycle, walk to the uptown, ride my bike to the uptown. So, I mean, there's 6 lanes. So I hope that we can show in this Central Peninsula plan, right away that we're gonna jump on some of these items that are, don't take maybe a massive amount of infrastructure dollars, so look, very, very supportive. I think it's been a huge undertaking. I think it's a major, win from a council perspective in terms of focusing on another document which is transformational, long-term planning, thinking, and now action. Every time we talk about the Central Peninsula Neighborhood Plan, I've always inserted the word action, and I think it's incredibly important. There's been tremendous engagement with the public, so I want to thank everyone for that. I want to thank, just quickly, FCM and Uptown Saint John. Uptown Saint John was, I can't remember who was first in, but we're going to say Uptown Saint John, I think, was first in to say, we believe in this. This is an excellent project. We'd like to help fund this. So thank you to Nancy Tissington and her board for helping us fund. Obviously, FCM, staff, all those that contributed. Our committee, Kay Gillis, Melissa Wakefield, Nancy Tissington, Ann McShane, my lad, Andrew Miller, Ben Appleby, Jeff Roach, Donna Reardon, and David Hickey. And it just made me think about, and I'm almost done, Council, it made me think about the volunteer heroes that have helped shape this community over our last 234 years. And, you know, as we're transforming, as we talked about heritage an hour ago, and we talked about some of the transformational changes there, I think about who were the leaders after the Great Fire who decided it wasn't going to be all wood anymore, it was going to be stone, and how maybe controversial that might have been in its point in history. And so to today's volunteer heroes, thank you, because you're sort of standing on the foundations of all those that have come before us. So thank you. And I'm thrilled that you know, long-term financial plans, roadmap for smart growth, population growth, you know, alignment opportunities of economic development, now the Central Peninsula Action Plan. And I think that I'm thrilled that we're working through challenging times, but at the same time, we're being very proactive and innovative. And I'm really proud of being a tiny little part of such an amazing community for this great work. And now we need the discipline, if we approve this, to follow through on the plan. Okay, well, thank you very much. We have a first reading on the floor, and no more, pardon? Common Clerk, help straighten me out, please.
Yeah, Your Worship, in this particular case, there'd be 5 motions. There's a Planning Advisory Committee recommendation, first and second reading of municipal and zoning bylaws.
Okay, and we've determined there is not a staff, it's just as you mentioned.
The PAC recommendation, which is
Is
to
first.
approve the plan and
Okay.
give first and second reading to the municipal
Okay,
and
so
zoning.
first is the PAC recommendation, please. That's already on the floor. Okay, that was moved by the deputy and seconded by Councillor Hickey. Okay, thank you. I'll call that question then. All those in favor? Anyone contrary minded? That is a unanimous vote of support. Okay, thank you. And then
Move first reading on
municipal
municipal plan.
Thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. And on that question, I'll call that. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone in opposition to that? Not seeing any. That's a unanimous vote. Thank you.
A law to amend the municipal plan bylaw.
Okay, thank you.
Second reading on municipal plan.
Thank you. Thank you, deputy. And seconded by a whisker to Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. If that's how we're going to do it. Thank you. And I'll call that question. All those in favor? Anybody contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you.
A law to amend the municipal plan bylaw.
Thank you. And first for zoning. Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. Moved by the deputy. And I'll call that question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of Saint John.
Thank you. Second. Thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. There we go. Okay. Perfect. I'll call that question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Not seeing any.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of Saint John.
Okay. Thank you. Well, that's
You have to receive and file that letter.
It's part of the public record.
okay. Perfect. Thank you. And does anyone want to stay maybe for another couple hours? Yeah, perfect. Move adjournment. Thank you. And thank you. And I'll call that question. All those in favor? Anybody contrary minded? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor, for commending me for all my work.
Exactly.
I don't think I got anything from you. You're not. That's weird, but you should get a message. No, we did for next week. Okay. And
Now the program is taken over here. Yep. So I'm going to make sure Jonathan gets this posted on our website as soon as possible.
It's not, the event's not until 2020.
But anyway, look.
post what? Sorry? Oh.
The materials from 4 December special meeting are
Mhm.
not on the website. Can you get them posted right away? The reason for it is the rumor mill is going out of control now on arena closures.
Oh.
There's a staff report in there on arena closures.
Okay.
To clear the air, but we haven't posted it on the website.
Okay.
So if you can go back and the agenda and all the staff reports for 4 December.